The story found me, which is funny. About 10 years ago, the founder of the Black Nights Film Festival here in Estonia, Tiina Lokk, was approached at Berlinale by a Russian journalist, and she brought the actual original autobiography to me, and I read it in my broken Russian over a weekend, cried, and just felt that I have to turn this into film. So I felt almost like unbelievable that how could this story have happened in the 1970s at the height of the Cold War here in Estonia in a Soviet Air Force base, and started researching it. Sergei Fetisov published his memoir in Russia in the early 90s, at a time when the society was opening up and there was a period of liberal democracy and kind of hope for the future. He had the courage and he wrote about the time that he served as a conscript in the Soviet Air Force in Estonia.
I was doing some work in Los Angeles in 2014, and I was kindly introduced to a producer and a film financer who had just actually read Peter's first draft of the script of Firebird. It was most curious because I had been writing different versions of relationships. Then when I first read the story, I was like, wow, like this is an incredible backdrop. So she put me in touch with Peter at the end of 2014.
First of all, this was very close to heart for me because I grew up as a closeted gay man in Soviet Estonia. We researched and interviewed quite a few people who did have same-sex relationships in the Soviet army at the time, and literally discovered that even at that time, in those circumstances, people did fall in love, did discover their feelings, and did the best that they could under the circumstances of an oppressive regime.
So we had a very long search for the casting of our other principal cast, and particularly for the characters of Roman and Luisa. I met a huge amount of actors during the creative process and in auditions, meeting some such talented actors, but they just didn't have the essence of Roman.
We were already at the end of May, a couple of months before the shooting was supposed to start, and getting worried until we were casting one day in Moscow and Oleg walked into the room, and I think it was pretty clear also from the first few seconds that this is our Roman. Except for one little thing, he didn't speak almost any English.
My agent called me and I think, come on, it's gonna be English. I don't know English, it's gonna be very hard for me, so no, I don't want it. But he said, Oleg, they are waiting for your self-tapes. I say, okay, I'll do it.
What at first felt like a huge hindrance and a huge challenge and difficulty for us to be able to communicate verbally has ended up in actually a very strong physical connection. It was much more about actions and much less about words. There were no words to describe what these two people are going through, what these three people are going through. Trying to walk that line between friendship and something more when there are no words to describe it, in some ways, I think has been a real gift between me and Oleg, which meant that we just had to also physically figure it out into going, okay, you can't talk about it, but how is it gonna happen? And then really with Diana as well, like it was, for me, one of the first moments that I met her, she really deeply reminded me of somebody significant in my life and sort of had this very similar quality. And she also was the absolute epitome of what we'd seen Luisa to be, like in looks, in the way that she spoke, in how she carried herself.
I think it's very important to include the female perspective because a lot of same-sex relationship stories, a lot of forbidden love stories just portray the two men or two women getting together and the third party is seen as an obstacle, almost like something to get rid of to reach happiness.
People in her age, Luisa's age, they already have a family, husband, children. She trying, and finally she just asking herself, maybe what's wrong with me? And that's why for women it's very important to feel confident.
In real life, they didn't choose to be in that kind of a relationship knowingly, risking everything, risking your career, your family, your life.
He is a countryside boy who is literally counting down his last days in the military conscription and can't wait to get out of there. He's a little bit lost at the beginning of the film and not really knowing what he wants to do with his life. he sort of sees his future as a little bit bleak and not really knowing where it's going. And it's actually through his friendship with Louisa and Volodya that he manages to survive the Air Force Base. And then it is by meeting Roman that he is reminded of his dreams and his passion and what he goes on to follow later in the film. What's interesting to me as an actor to basically show how else would somebody respond to this, not what's the most conventional way to respond, but what else is possible, what else can I potentially show.
So I will be perfect in this movie. So I start to run, start to go to the gym, and I think, wow, cool, it's a chance for me to be the hero. And then I start to discover what lieutenant is it, what soldier is it. Soviet people, they always like ideal people, like they don't drink vodka, they don't have sex, they like, you know, like something more than human. Then I have some guy who help us with discipline, with all what is mean, how colonel talk to lieutenant and lieutenant to colonel, what is usual to do pilot. Step by step with Peter, with Tom, with Diana, with everybody we start to build. They helps me. And you know how say, это короля играет свита. They play me.
We really aim to stay as true to the original story as possible, meaning that the love story between the characters is fully as he wrote and as he told us. In the process of writing the script, we actually went to Moscow and we interviewed real Sergei. We had an amazing opportunity to spend several days with him and did hours and tens of hours of audio recordings and interviews, which really informed me as the director and as a co-writer to get the details right, to get the context right, to understand the characters better.
Но все это я к тому, что вот когда пришло время расставаться, в общем-то, и понимали, что уже, ну, точно не знал, что мы так будем, в общем-то, нет-нет, да видеться, да, он сказал, только не оставайся один. Самое страшное для тебя будет, если ты останешься.
I'd never been to Estonia before. It's been so fascinating to learn about the history and about the people and about how, you know, the Estonian feeling and community has really thrived so much since the collapse of the Soviet Union. And then, you know, to shoot in Estonia where there are many old Soviet environments, obviously which are kind of crumbling now, but to go and find out these different places, these different sets, and shooting in East Estonia around Sompa was just kind of like amazing to be sunk into such authenticity in the locations which are here.
A lot of films about Soviet Union have been made in a very stereotypical way. Like in Hollywood, they would grade it bluish, green, they would have all the costumes in gray or black. Don't get me wrong, the system was very oppressive, but people still made the best within it, and they enjoyed life, and they had parties, and they had sex, and they had relationships, and they wore colorful clothes, and they actually took a lot of care to, maybe even more care of how they looked. We wanted the film to be authentic, so we also wanted to shoot all of the exteriors actually on location in Moscow. And we were at first really not sure whether we are able to do that, especially considering the sensitive nature of the forbidden love story.
I had to wait for the water, the surface water, to go completely still, which means just like having to hold my breath and myself underwater in the freezing cold, and then kind of like jump up and look like everything's fine. Well, not everything's fine, because obviously there's the nightmare, but certainly not look like I'm freezing cold or beginning to shake. Then we got kindly poured with hot water by our costume department. They were literally ladling, like soup ladling hot water onto our bodies to make us warm enough.
We, for example, shot at one of the few last remaining bomb-proof hangars of the former Soviet Air Force with a real MiG-21. So we had to literally find the few remaining old crumbling buildings and fix them up. Our construction crews had to fix floors, paint walls, put in electricity. Malgus, who plays the KGB major, he walked into the room where he tells where Sergei tells the joke about potatoes, and Malgus walks into the room and just stands there and like, what's going on? And he's, this was the very room where I slept and lived for 2 years when I was a conscript in the Soviet army. One of the big challenges actually in filming Firebird was putting on the ballet. Since it wasn't in the repertoire at the Estonian National Ballet, we actually had to ask a favor from the head choreographer, Toomas Edo, who kindly literally staged and choreographed scenes from the ballet, especially for filming. So they rehearsed for months. We created sets, we created new costumes, lighting design, and literally put on a performance of Firebird just to film the scenes for the film. It was an honor, and it was humbling to work with some of the top people in the world. Toomas Edo used to be himself one of the principal dancers of the English National Ballet before moving back to Estonia. It's been amazing to also see so many straight people, so many women come to me after the screenings and in tears sharing how this film was so relatable to them, how it brought out their memories of how their husband in the past cheated with another woman, for example. And the universality of this love story, the relatability is something that I really cherish.
So it is through those public demonstrations which feel authentic and true that gives permission for other people to do the same thing. It can feel very overwhelming at times to be able to change these subject matters in the world, but we can really own them by being that example, by experiencing art that inspires us to be a greater version of ourselves, a more free version of ourselves. I believe it is our divine right to love whoever we love, and who on earth is it to say that that's not okay?
Clearly, we have a core LGBT audience, since this is one of the really rare stories of the community and a very unique story from the time and place which has rarely been told before. But from the other hand, it's a very universal story, and a lot of normal cinema goers, a lot of younger and older married couples, boyfriend, girlfriends, found a message in the film, found that it touches them.
People look at this not like, we make movie for some group of people. No, this movie for everybody who know what love is.
It was amazing to see how the film was received in Tallinn, in Estonia, and how much the story has really impacted people and how astounded people are by the size of the film that we created.